Foreign Minister, the German Foreign Minister, and al-Sarraj. It was all about friendship. The German Foreign Minister said this is a historic opportunity for Syria, and Germany is very, very keen to help Syria with it. But the main topic, which is now being discussed here at the Chancellery with Chancellor Friedrich Merz, is what's going to happen with the 950,000 Syrians who are still having a refugee status. Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor, said a few months ago, to counter also the far-right sentiments, he said that there's no reason for them to stay anymore in Germany. There's no reason anymore for asylum. But I've been speaking to people here, and they are keen to go back. But they say the time is not right, because as al-Sarraj said, there need to be 20 million new houses built in Syria. So there is not the right time now to return these people as soon as possible.
And President Sharo, he was at this economic roundtable at the investment forum to attract funding for Syria. How did that go?
Yes, he was very much keen to talk about business with Germany. He said Germany has great potential to help Syria with the reconstruction. And he also said the investment climate in Syria has improved. And he also pointed out that because of the war and the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz, Syria can play an essential role for Europe as a transit point also for energy supplies, because of course these supplies are now lacking here in Europe. So there's a lot of potential, he said, and we have to wait and see what really comes out of it. They brought quite a large business community from Syria. They're meeting business people here in Germany. So we will hear in a few hours what really will be the results of this quite historic meeting here.
All right, that's a story from Berlin. Step Basson reporting. Thanks a lot. Myanmar junta leader Min Aung Hlaing has formally stepped down as army chief after Parliament nominated him for the presidency. In a ceremony in the capital, Naypyidaw, he handed the top army post over to the intelligence chief Yi Win-woo. Hlaing ousted Myanmar's civilian government in a 2021 coup. The country had its first elections since then, over December and January, and opposition groups call the vote a sham. An attack has killed at least 14 people in Sudan's South Kordofan state. At this moment, it is unclear who is behind the attack. Fighting between Sudan's army and the paramilitary rapid support forces has killed tens of thousands of people and forced millions from their homes. During more than 2 years of Israel's war in Gaza, thousands of people have gone missing, and many Palestinians are struggling to find out what happened to their family members and indeed their friends. Tarek Abu Zoom spoke to a mother who only has a death certificate for her missing daughter.
In this house in Khan Yunus, silence carries the weight of a story that refuses to end. The walls are blackened, the ceiling is still scarred by fire, but Tahrir Abu Madi lives here again, among memories that survived what her daughter did not. Her daughter Malak was 20, a university student, a volunteer at Nasser Hospital, a young woman who, like many others, tried to help as war engulfed Gaza. The family was displaced and living in Al-Mawasi, but when Israeli ground forces advanced into Khan Yunus in 2024, Malak briefly returned home. She went back with her brother Yusuf for her university books. They were never seen again. When relatives later reached the home, they found it severely damaged and burned. Inside, forensic teams recovered human remains. Based on the findings, Gaza's Ministry of Health issued Malak's death certificate. But months later, a new twist. Recently released detainees shared a list of Palestinian prisoners. Among the names, Malak Abu Madi. Next to her name, just 3 words, no information available.
I haven't heard from my kids so far. I struggle with anxiety and restless thoughts at night. Life has lost its taste.
She tried to seek answers, contacting a lawyer in the occupied Palestinian territories, but the legal costs were beyond her reach. Human rights groups say cases like Malak's reflect a broader pattern of ambiguity surrounding detentions.
We estimate the number of those forcibly disappeared at around 3,000 people. Most of those are unknown if they were dead or inside Israeli jails, because the Israeli authorities refuse to provide any information regarding these people.
Now, Tahrir lives between two realities: an official death certificate and a name on a prisoner list. In a house once marked by fire, a mother writes what records cannot resolve. We are still waiting for you, Malak, our white coat girl. Tariq Abu Azzoum, Al Jazeera, Khan Yunus.
Israel's Prime Minister has ordered officials to give Jerusalem's Latin Patriarch full access to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in occupied East Jerusalem. That decision came after the Israeli police prevented the Patriarch from conducting Palm Sunday Mass at the church. The incident led to widespread condemnation from around the world. Victoria Gatenby has this now.
For the first time in centuries, Palm Sunday Mass was not held at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in occupied East Jerusalem. That's after Israeli police blocked Cardinal Pierre Battista Pizzaballa from entering the church. He's an archbishop with Catholic jurisdiction across Israel and the Palestinian territories. Officers said they were concerned for his safety, but the decision was condemned by European leaders, including Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, who said it was offensive to anyone who believes in religious freedom. Church leaders also spoke out against the actions of the Israeli police.
We did take the measures to prevent any problems and any risk to the people, to the faithful, but still to have the heads of churches not being able to celebrate one of the most sacred days of the year in the Holy Sepulchre, in the most sacred place for Christians, is something unheard of.
Palm Sunday marks the beginning of the most important week in the Christian calendar, leading to Easter. It's when Christians celebrate the arrival of Jesus in Jerusalem. They believe he was welcomed triumphantly by crowds waving palm branches. But this year, Christians are unable to fully celebrate due to police restrictions. Holy sites are closed because of the conflict in Iran and the threat of Iranian missiles.
It's very sad to see Jerusalem empty like this. Usually pilgrimage, tourism, full of people praying for this day is the Palm Sunday. And I wish next year will be better year and this war will finish and we will have peace from Jerusalem.
The Cardinal held Palm Sunday Mass at another church in occupied East Jerusalem. Among the misery and pain of war, the faithful shared messages of hope and perseverance, praying this Holy Week will bring respite for people across the Middle East. Victoria Gatenby, Al Jazeera.
President Donald Trump says he doesn't have a problem with a Russian tanker delivering 650,000 barrels of oil to Cuba. It would be the first oil delivery there in over 2 months. The Trump administration cut off supplies from Venezuela and effectively imposed a blockade. The Caribbean island has been facing its worst energy crisis in decades, with repeated electricity blackouts and disruptions to essential services like hospital care and trash removal. Going to take a short break. Got more news in a couple of minutes. See you then. Bye for now.
The latest news as it breaks.
Police say that they will be highly visible in this area in the coming weeks, increasing their patrols and working with faith leaders.
With detailed coverage.
This is the second time in less than a week that the power has gone out all over the country.
From around the world.
The cost of jet fuel is surging. It has doubled in Europe and up more than 80% in Asia. It will be the customers who bear the brunt of this.
In-depth analysis of the day's headlines.
Diplomacy, yet again, was used as a ruse for war.
Critical debate.
Who betrayed the table? Who attacked the negotiations for the second time? For the third time during the talks we should be attacked? Who is talking about a greater country for itself? Israel, not Iran.
Iran has been a huge supporter of terrorism over the years. I really have to take exception to the idea that Iran is innocent in this.
Inside Story on Al Jazeera.
Hearing the facts.
A busy day for Iran today could mean when Iran retaliates, it will be a busy day for cities in the Gulf.
With the latest global news and insightful documentaries, Al Jazeera's teams across the world bring you closer to the heart of the story.
is 1100 hours GMT. This is Al Jazeera live from Doha with our continuing coverage of the war between the United States, Israel and Iran. I'm Nick Clark. Coming up, Israel's largest oil refinery in the city of Haifa is hit for a second time as Iran continues to strike back.
We've had very good negotiations today with Iran, getting a lot of the things that they should have given us a long time ago.
President Donald Trump says a deal to end the war with Iran is near, but warns the US could seize Iran's oil hub in Hog Island. Lebanon says one of its soldiers has been killed by an Israeli attack near Tyre. And that's after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered the military to expand its invasion of southern Lebanon. And a search for closure in Gaza. We speak to a Palestinian mother whose daughter's fate remains uncertain more than a year after her disappearance. So, US President Donald Trump has hinted at a possible deal with Iran, but he says he's not ruling out a ground invasion too. Iran has kept up its retaliatory attacks on Israel. An oil refinery in the northern city of Haifa has caught fire after being hit by missile debris shortly after the military detected launches from Iran. And people across Iran have endured another night of US and Israeli strikes. There have been large explosions in the capital of Tehran. A petrochemical plant in the northwestern city of Tabriz has also been hit. And President Donald Trump has told the Financial Times that US forces could seize Iran's main oil export hub on Hog Island. Speaking later on Air Force One, Trump suggested a deal to end the war is possible.
I think we'll make a deal with them, pretty sure. Whether it's possible, we won't. But we've had regime change, if you look already, because the one regime was decimated, destroyed, they're all dead. The next regime is mostly dead. And the third regime, we're dealing with different people than anybody's dealt with before. It's a whole different group of people. So I would consider that regime change. And frankly, they've been very reasonable.
We're live from Tehran, from Dubai and from Tyre in southern Lebanon. But first, here's Nida Ibrahim in Ramallah with more on the Israeli oil refinery that was attacked in Haifa.
We know from the Israeli sources that they've reported impact in 7 different locations, so we might be looking at a fragmenting warhead of one of these missiles, but this targets a key and a strategic location in Israel. The Bazan oil refinery in Haifa is the main one. This is the second strike of its kind during this round of fighting between Iran and Israel, but it had been hit twice before during the June 2025 fighting and a war between Iran and Israel as well. All of these damages to key and strategic locations are being hidden, being monitored closely by the Israeli censor. And usually we don't receive much information about what happened. Last time this happened, we've heard that one of the infrastructures related to electricity has been damaged, and it took a few days just to fix it. But again, when we talk about these key assets in Israel, it's hard to tell how much damage has been incurred. We've seen the pictures of the fire. According to the Israeli sources, they say that no casualties have been reported. But again, we might be looking at a damage to an industrial building inside of it, while the Haifa municipality is calming down residents, saying that no leaks whatsoever happened, so there is no danger of an environmental kind.
Despite Donald Trump's claims that negotiations are progressing, Iran says diplomacy with the US is not being held directly. Tehran is calling Washington's demands excessive and maximalist.
To date, we have had no direct negotiations with the United States. Since the last round of talks, what has occurred has been the receipt of messages through certain intermediaries, including Pakistan, conveying the United States' interest in and request for negotiations. It is only natural that whenever talk of negotiations comes from the United States, everyone's sensitivities are heightened. I do not know to what extent these claims are taken seriously even within the United States itself, or how seriously they are viewed internationally. Our position is clear. Unlike the other side, which constantly shifts its stance, the Islamic Republic of Iran has known its position from the very beginning. The points that have been conveyed to us, whatever one chooses to call them, 15-point clauses, more or fewer, they're highly excessive and maximalist in nature.
Let us get the very latest from Tehran. Tawhid Asadi joins us live from there. So, Tawhid, excessive and maximalist does not sound like resolution is close.
Yes, indeed. This is not for the first time that we hear from this spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've got other Iranian officials all coming out over the past few weeks to say that there are no talks and negotiations with the United States at this point. And that is obviously coming from the very fact that Iranians are saying while the country is under assault, talking about any negotiation is not relevant. And we hear that from time to time from different officials. And this time again, it was Mr. Baghai, the spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, saying that there is a background to that. The country was already engaged not once but twice in the trajectory of diplomatic engagement with the United States. Once back in June when the country faced all of a sudden a campaign of airstrikes by the Americans just in the middle of a negotiation, and while the country was expecting a next round of talks with Washington, and this time again the same scenario was repeated. So there is this cloud of mistrust when it comes to potentiality of negotiation, and we know that the two sides are poles apart when it comes to their demands. The Iranian side is saying that actually the 15-point plan proposed by the Americans is excessive, is maximalist, and it's unreasonable. Meanwhile, the demands by the Iranian side seem to be not welcomed by the United States. But also we know that a spokesperson for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs talked about other spheres, most important of which I can refer to the idea of withdrawal from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT. He said that the parliament is right now considering that, and if that happens, it's going to be obviously an important development. Also, he said that Iran should not be expected to practice unilateral self-restriction under this ongoing situation. And he also said that Iran is not at war with regional countries.
Tahir, with all this as a backdrop, there are still sustained airstrikes right across the country.
The truth of the matter is that we are witnessing the continuation of this campaign. And over the past 24 hours, specifically, I can say from the midnight onward, we were able to hear the sounds of massive blasts across the capital and the activation of the air defense system. But this is not limited to the capital. We know that across the country in different cities, such as Shiraz, Qom, Tabriz, we are receiving reports about the continuation of these airstrikes. In Tabriz in particular, a petrochemical facility was targeted, and in other cities we know that it's not just the military centers or headquarters but also the residential areas. And we've got this from the Red Crescent of the country that more than 92,000 civilian units have been impacted so far, some of them damaged, some of them fully disrupted, and that is showing the extended scope of the American and Israeli strikes now moving into a new level to include infrastructure. We know that last time Tehran for a few hours had experienced an electricity blackout due to the attack on the power infrastructure in the capital. The same happened in several other cities such as Karaj and Khondab.
Tahir, thanks for that, Tahir Asadi there with the very latest from Tehran. Israel has launched a new wave of strikes on Beirut's southern suburb. The attacks follow more forced evacuations or more evacuation orders by the Israeli military. Israel says it's hitting Hezbollah targets in the city. More than 1 million Lebanese people have been displaced by Israel's offensive. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the Israeli army to widen its offensive in southern Lebanon. He says it's meant to increase security along the border after attacks by Hezbollah.
And in Lebanon, I have now instructed the military to further expand the existing security belt in order to finally thwart the threat of invasion and to keep the anti-tank missile fire away from our border. We eliminated thousands of Hezbollah terrorists, and above all, we eliminated the enormous threat of 150,000 missiles and rockets, which were intended to destroy Israeli cities. But Hezbollah still has a residual ability to launch rockets at us, and what I discussed today with the commanders here is ways to eliminate this threat as well.
Well, let's reflect on how the situation is developing on the ground in southern Lebanon. Have a look at this. Israel's defense minister said the ground invasion is about creating what he calls a buffer zone up to the Litani River there. But the Israeli military has issued forced evacuation orders further north, as far as the Zerani River. And Israeli forces are advancing now on multiple fronts, from Nakora in the southwest to Bint Jibil in the south, as well as towards Qiyam and by the Litani River. Lebanon's army says that a soldier has been killed at an army checkpoint near Tyre, and that's where Abaida Hito joins us from. So Abaida, just tell us more what we know about this latest attack.
Well, there's one Lebanese soldier that was killed in this attack and others injured. This is not the first time that Israel has targeted and killed Lebanese soldiers, even though they're not a party to this current conflict. I'm going to let my cameraman kind of show you around while we continue here. The Lebanese soldier that was killed is just across the water there. At the end of this coastline, you see the town of Naqoura that you mentioned in the intro. This is a town that's just on the border with Israel. And the Israeli troops have not actually entered into Naqoura. They've circumvented it, and they've come to a town called Bayada and reached a hilltop position that they were in control of in 2024. It's called Irmith Hill, and it overlooks Bayada and the coastal road. And that is from where they can see the coastal road where this checkpoint was that these Lebanese soldiers were manning on the coastal road here in Tyre. And this particular road, if my cameraman is showing you now, is this kind of white area that's there. This is where the soldier was killed. People here are understanding it as a message from Israel to the Lebanese military to move back. We heard from Netanyahu that they want to expand the invasion of southern Lebanon and take over more territory. These are places that Israel is familiar with. There are 5 hilltop positions in this region, just in the coastal area in front of you, that Israel was in control of in 2024 after the ceasefire. They left, and these are very strategic hilltops because they overlook this coastal road that connects Tyre to Israel directly. It's a long highway, and there's a direct border crossing at the end of it once you reach Israel, and it connects the city of Tyre, which is home to hundreds of thousands of people. Many of them have left this major city here in southern Lebanon, perhaps the most major populated center in southern Lebanon, and people here are concerned that this fight is going to continue. We've seen significant escalation over the last several days. We saw a helicopter yesterday just out over the sea there, shooting into the land areas that we just showed you. We've seen rocket launches and missile launches. Hezbollah continues to manage to launch attacks against Israeli troops, both inside Israeli territory and in Lebanese territory. Some of those positions in those places we just showed you, they're also using weapons like kamikaze drones, but Israel is responding with very violent attacks on civilian areas. Today we saw attacks on multiple locations here and around Tyre and other parts of southern Lebanon. So people here are concerned mostly about this escalation that Netanyahu seems to be adamant about and is going to cause the unknown disaster here, because they are promising, at least this is what we heard from the Chief of Staff of Israel, Israel Katz, the Minister of Defense, saying that he wanted to turn these areas into Beit Hanun and Rafah like in Gaza. So this is a major concern for people here in the south.
All right, that's the story from Tyre in Lebanon. Abaida Hito, thank you. Well, the Indonesian government has condemned the death of an Indonesian peacekeeper deployed with UNIFIL, which is United Nations mission in southern Lebanon. Another peacekeeper was critically injured in that incident when a projectile detonated close to a UN position. UNIFIL says it's not clear where the projectile came from. An investigation is underway now, they say. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has offered condolences to Indonesia. He's warning that peacekeepers are being endangered by recent Israeli attacks. Let's hear now from Candice Ardail, who's a spokesperson for UNIFIL, and she says stronger security measures will need to be put in place to ensure the safety of their peacekeepers, or they'll be forced to leave.
We have measures in place, physical security measures, processes.
Everything is done with an abundance of caution. And unfortunately, this is not always 100% effective. And we've seen this, unfortunately, last night with the attack, with the impact on our base and the death and serious injury of our peacekeepers. We'll continue to, as part of the investigation, look at the circumstances and make any improvements that need to be made. But we continue to take the safety and security of our peacekeepers with the utmost seriousness, because of course, if peacekeepers can't be safe and secure, we can't perform our mandate. We can't continue with what we're doing in terms of working with the parties to liaise between them, to try to de-escalate the situation, and to monitor and observe and report to the Security Council on the situation that's happening here. There are civilians who are remaining, and their position is becoming increasingly difficult. And so there are agencies that are providing humanitarian support. And as UNIFIL, as peacekeepers, we're supporting those agencies and coordinating between the parties just to ensure that that aid can reach the people who need it. So all of those things are continuing. Again, it's a very volatile situation. It's very complicated, but peacekeepers are persisting in doing what we can to help secure, to help the population and to help move back toward a place where the parties can undertake a political and diplomatic conversation that will hopefully lead to an end to this, because there is no military solution here. That is not what's going to end this conflict. We've known that in the past and we know it now. And so we continue to urge the parties to move toward that.
Let's explore all of this further now with Ali Risk, who's a security affairs analyst. Hello again, Ali. What is your reading of what Israel is doing in southern Lebanon, how it affects the war as a whole against Iran?
What Israel is doing in southern Lebanon now, it says that this is part of its post-October 7 strategy, meaning let's establish forward defenses, we're surrounded by threats, and so let's preempt those threats before they materialize against Israel. They pursued this in the occupied Palestinian territories. They did the same thing also in Syria under the same pretext, and they're trying to do the same thing as well in Lebanon. So they're pursuing, I think it's part of the greater Israel project, although they try and give it a kind of defensive nature. But I think that Israel might be miscalculating when it wants to displace, or when it attempts to displace, these huge numbers of predominantly Shia residents, by the way. If you talk about Tyre, for example, you're talking about a predominantly Shia city. A lot of people from the Amal movement, in addition to Hezbollah. Amal is led, of course, by the Lebanese parliament speaker Nabih Berri, another major Shia political group. So by displacing Shia masses, I think that Israel risks solidifying or strengthening Shia support for Hezbollah instead of having the opposite effect. That's why it might be a miscalculation. Now, in terms of how this could impact the situation with Iran, look, I think that the Israelis also see this as a confrontation, part of the broader confrontation with Iran, part of the conflict against Iranian influence in Lebanon. And that's why I think Netanyahu is willing to go to great lengths in order to fulfill his project against Hezbollah in Lebanon, because Netanyahu views that his main mission in life, or his main focus, is to diminish Iran's strength and to diminish Iran's influence. That's why we see him taking what appear to be very risky endeavors, like, for example, mobilizing for a possible large-scale ground invasion. I think that he thinks that it's worth the effort because that will diminish Iranian influence by diminishing Hezbollah.
And on the broader issue of the war in Iran, what is your assessment as a security analyst of the potential for any resolution coming through these talks, such as they are, for what we know, being successful?
Look, it's very hard to understand what US President Donald Trump is thinking. In the end, it's going to be Donald Trump who will make the decision. Now, unfortunately, Donald Trump has proven himself to be very much under the sway of the Israelis, or the Israelis have basically succeeded in convincing him with rosy scenarios. Now, we have seen him talk about talks today, for example. He spoke about talks, but today is Monday. As you know, the markets open on Monday, so it's very likely that this is only for the sake of trying to limit the economic damage which is caused by this ongoing war. At the same time, I don't think that the door to talks is completely closed. We have heard, for example, about American Vice President J.D. Vance potentially having a role. Now, if that's true, I think the Americans might be, I emphasize, they might be serious about reaching some kind of a breakthrough, but it's too early to tell. The Americans are sending Marine forces, other ground forces. This is a sign that they're seriously looking into the possibility of a large-scale ground operation. And I think that a big problem, finally, is Trump's own mindset, because I think that Trump, because of his own ego, doesn't want to appear as a weakling who backed away from a confrontation with Iran.
All right.
And I think that Israel and the warmongers in Washington are going to use this to the maximum in order to push Trump more and more towards mission creep.
Okay, Ali, we'll see how it all pans out. Ali Risk joining us there from Beirut. Thank you. Well, Gulf nations have come under continued attack by Iran. Kuwait says one Indian national has been killed in an attack on a power and water desalination plant. This brings Kuwait's death toll to 7 in the conflict. Iran has denied it carried out the attack. That's after 10 Kuwaiti troops were injured in another Iranian missile attack. Al Jazeera's Zain Bezravi is standing by for us in Dubai. So, Zain, has there been any response to this attack in Kuwait?
Well, the Secretary General of the GCC has condemned that attack on the military base that saw 10 Kuwaiti service members receive serious injuries. That was a strike that the GCC has condemned. With regards to the water desalination and power plant attack that saw the death of that one Indian employee, that is a kind of escalation threshold in the GCC. Attacking drinking water facilities, attacking power generation facilities was an escalation threshold that Iran has in previous weeks not crossed. And it seems though, now it seems as though it's distancing itself from this attack as well. The Brigadier General Ibrahim Zulfakhari, the spokesman for the Khatam al-Anbiya Central Headquarters, the military spokesman for Iran, has come out and in a statement has said, quote, the brutal aggression by the Zionist regime, what they call Israel, against Kuwait's desalination plant, carried out in recent hours under the pretext of accusing the Islamic Republic of Iran, is a clear sign of the baseness and depravity of the Zionist occupiers. Countries of the West Asia region must remain alert to the sedition and destabilization plots of the American Zionist enemies aimed at destroying the region. So the read of this statement is clear. What Iran is saying is that this was not them. This was they're laying it at the feet of Israel, of the United States, of suggesting that this is perhaps a false flag attack, something they've done in the past in this war. They've previously warned against the possibility of something like this in other attacks, including in Azerbaijan, in Turkey, and Oman. In fact, recently in Oman, the Omani government, after an attack on the Salalah port, did put out a statement saying that they were investigating the attack and that no one had claimed responsibility. Now, all of this is happening in an environment where there is escalation and expansion of this conflict. And amidst the chaos, doubts like this, creating doubts like this, denying attacks like this, while it may seem like Iran is cherry picking, what it certainly does is add to the confusion and cast doubt over what's really happening on the ground in terms of ground realities.
All right, Zain, thanks for that. Zain Bezravi there in Dubai. Well, Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara is making his first official visit to Germany. Shara is meeting Chancellor Friedrich Merz to discuss a range of issues, including the Iran war and the return of Syrian refugees. Shara is also expected to discuss the recovery and reconstruction of Syria after years of war. In the last few hours, Shara joined an economic roundtable in Berlin.
1.3 million Syrians are residing in Germany, one of the largest Syrian populations in the entire continent. We can speak about turning around this massive wave of refugees. This could be beneficial to German companies willing to invest in Syria, taking advantage of the human capital that has taken some sort of education here in Germany, and to transfer all of this experience through to large companies to invest in Syria.
Myanmar junta leader Min Aung Hlaing has formally stepped down as army chief after parliament nominated him for the presidency. In a ceremony in the capital Naypyidaw, he handed the top army post over to the intelligence chief Yi Win-oo. Hlaing ousted Myanmar's civilian government in a 2021 coup. The country had its first elections since then over December and January. Opposition groups call the vote a sham. President Donald Trump says he doesn't have a problem with a Russian tanker delivering 650,000 barrels of oil to Cuba. It would be the first oil delivery there in over 2 months. The Trump administration cut off supplies from Venezuela and effectively imposed a blockade. The Caribbean island has been facing its worst energy crisis in decades, with repeated electricity blackouts and disruptions to essential services. An attack has killed at least 14 people in Sudan's South Kordofan state. It's unclear who's behind the attack. Fighting between Sudan's army and the paramilitary rapid support forces has killed tens of thousands of people and forced millions from their homes. Now, during more than 2 years of Israel's war in Gaza, thousands of people have gone missing. Many Palestinians are struggling to find out what happened to their family members and friends. Tarek Abu Zoom spoke to a mother who has a death certificate for her missing daughter, but has no idea where she could be.
In this house in Khan Yunis, silence carries the weight of a story that refuses to end. The walls are blackened, the ceiling is still scarred by fire, but Tahrir Abu Madi lives here again, among memories that survived what her daughter did not. Her daughter Malak was 20, a university student, a volunteer at Nasser Hospital, a young woman who, like many others, tried to help as war engulfed Gaza. The family was displaced and living in Al-Mawasi, but when Israeli ground forces advanced into Khan Yunis in 2024, Malak briefly returned home. She went back with her brother Yusuf for her university books. They were never seen again. When relatives later reached the home, they found it severely damaged and burned. Inside, forensic teams recovered human remains. Based on the findings, Gaza's Ministry of Health issued Malak's death certificate. But months later, a new twist. Recently released detainees shared a list of Palestinian prisoners. Among the names, Malak Abu Madi. Next to her name, just 3 words: no information available.
I haven't heard from my kids so far. I struggle with anxiety and restless thoughts at night. Life has lost its taste.
She tried to seek answers, contacting a lawyer in the occupied Palestinian territories, but the legal costs were beyond her reach. Human rights groups say cases like Malak's reflect a broader pattern of ambiguity surrounding detentions.
We estimate the number of those forcibly disappeared at around 3,000 people. Most of those are unknown if they were dead or inside Israeli jails, because the Israeli authorities refuse to provide any information regarding these people.
Now, Tahrir lives between 2 realities: an official death certificate and a name on a prisoner list. In a house once marked by fire, a mother writes what records cannot resolve. We are still waiting for you, Malak, our white coat girl. Tarek Abu Zoom, Al Jazeera, Khan Yunis.
The ongoing pain of the war on Gaza. That said, Inside Stories coming up, right up about the involvement of Yemen's Houthis in the war. I'll see you soon. Bye for now.
What difference will the Houthis' involvement in the war make? They've launched missiles at Israel in support of Iran and threatened more attacks. What are the consequences of opening a new front? And given the Yemeni group's proximity to the Red Sea, what could it mean for global shipping? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. They have threatened to join the war ever since it started a month ago. Now Ansar Allah, also known as the Houthis, has followed up on their threat and launched missiles towards Israel. It marks a significant escalation. The Iran-aligned group is based in Yemen, and it's feared they could attack shipping in the Red Sea, as they've done before. That would further disrupt global trade, already affected by Iran's blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. So, will Israel and the US retaliate? And if so, how? And how could all of this shape the war? We'll put those questions to our panel of guests in just a moment. But first, this report from Imogen Kimber.
Ansar Allah, also known as the Houthis, enter the war, targeting Israel in support of Iran. On the streets of the Yemeni capital Sana'a, which is under the group's control, people rallied.
We came out here to send a message of solidarity to the Iranian people, their leadership, and Iran's Revolutionary Guard, which is facing the most powerful tyrants on earth, the United States and Israel. We stand with them and with the Axis of Resistance.
The Axis of Resistance refers to Iran-backed groups such as the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and Hamas in Gaza. A spokesperson says the Houthis fired a barrage of missiles at sensitive Israeli military sites.
We will continue to carry out military operations in the coming days until the criminal enemy ceases its attacks and aggression.
Although they are arguably the most powerful of Iran's non-state allies, the Houthis' firepower is no match for the Israeli military on the ground or in the air. But the group does have leverage, which it has used before. The Bab el-Mandeb Strait, between Africa and the Middle East, off the coast of Yemen. It's only around 30 kilometers at its narrowest point, but 12% of globally shipped goods passes through the waterway. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has already largely blocked the Strait of Hormuz, another maritime corridor. That's preventing exports of oil and gas supplies from leaving the Gulf, pushing up energy prices. Any closure of Bab el-Mandeb would exacerbate the disruption, leading to delays and higher costs, as ships would be forced to use longer routes. Between 2023 and 2025, the Houthis attacked Israeli-linked vessels in the Red Sea, sending global supply chains into disarray and leading to losses in the billions of dollars. These latest strikes come as the US and Iran are holding indirect talks, part of a regional push for peace. Both sides have issued conditions to end the war, but even while these diplomatic efforts play out, the attacks are escalating. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
There is a lot to discuss, so let's meet our panel of guests who are joining us for today's Inside Story. From Washington, D.C., we're joined by Hisham Al-Omaisi. He's the Senior Yemen Advisor at the European Institute of Peace. In Cairo, H.A. Hellier, a Senior Associate Fellow in Defence and Security Studies at the Royal United Services Institute. And our third guest is from Whitefish, Montana. Michael Mulroy is a former U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defence for the Middle East. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us for our discussion today. Let me start with you, H.A. We're at the 1 month mark in this war. The Houthis stayed on the sidelines until now. What do you think changed?
So I think that the Houthis already threatened to resume attacks in the Red Sea in response to the Iran war. But I think that they were holding back, probably for a number of different reasons, one of which would have been, frankly, directions from Tehran. I don't think that they would have made this decision to just go it alone. I think that it would have been done in coordination. There may be some domestic issues at play here as well. within Yemen itself in terms of opening up new fronts. And I don't think that they want to necessarily antagonize the Saudis unless they really have to. But they've certainly made that decision now. Having said that, they haven't done everything that they could do, and I think that that is something that we should keep in mind about the way this war has unfolded over the past month. These haven't been wild, crazy, ad hoc escalations. They're following a pattern. They're being precise. They're being very calculating, which makes them not less dangerous. But I think that unfortunately we're likely to see more things go in the future as compared to right now.
Hisham, same question to you. Why now?
Well, they're following a staggered approach. This is basically a retaliation for the increasing attacks on Iran. The Houthi spokesperson specifically mentioned the attacks on the infrastructure in Iran, and this being a response to that, but also in support of the axis of resistance. We've seen what happened with Hezbollah over the past couple of weeks and the increasing pressure on them. And the Houthis are expanding those fronts so that the U.S. and Israel will be fighting at multiple fronts in an attempt to ease that pressure on the other members of the axis. There's been a lot of talk with the U.S. saying they're going to be putting boots on the ground, and the Houthis are hoping to deter an invasion by basically signaling that now they have joined the fighting. They could additionally escalate and disrupt global trade and oil shipments if they choose to shut down Bab el-Mandeb. But just referring back to what Dr. Al-Helgier also said, joining now allows them to rally support at home. Remember, the Houthis are portraying themselves as defenders of the Muslim cause, and they want to distract from the Yemen's internal challenges, the economy, the governance. They want to project power beyond their borders. And despite the attacks of the Israelis on the infrastructure or on their leadership over the past year.
Mick, in the first term of President Trump, you were in the leadership in the Pentagon. This war already, many observers say, is not going well. How do you think they will see this development in the Pentagon now?
It's good to be with you all. I would agree, first of all, that it's likely completely coordinated with Iran. Iran views them as a strategic asset. They supported them for years. As you said, this is not a new issue. We've been dealing with it for many years. And I think Iran has a plan. The plan included seizing the Strait of Hormuz, and likely is going to include initiating the Houthis to potentially disrupt the flow of commercial vessels in the Red Sea, and specifically the Bab el-Mandeb. So I think that's what we're, of course, concerned about, because it would take the current economic global issue and compound it substantially. How the Pentagon is going to deal with it, likely how we've dealt with everything so far. Major air campaigns trying to deplete their ability to launch these missiles and drones. That's unlikely to be completely successful, and all they have to do is to hit a few commercial vessels, and it will shut down. Because even if we can militarily deal with it, it's more than just that. We have to convince these commercial vessels and those that insure them that it's safe, and that is a big issue for the military and something we've been discussing, since I was in the Pentagon.
H.A., just tell us a little bit more about the relationship between the Houthis and Iran, because they are allies, but my understanding is the Houthis are not under direct Iranian command. They don't necessarily do what Tehran says always.
I think that's a good way to put it. I think that, frankly, when you think about the allied militias across the wider Middle East that are, quote unquote, part of this resistance axis that of Iran, they're all, well, not all, but particularly when it comes to the Houthis and Hezbollah, these are not simply Iranian agents. They have their own domestic concerns. They have their own issues at home to think about, but they are very strongly allied with Tehran. And in different cases, and of course in different conflicts, rely tremendously on Iranian support. When it comes to the Houthis in this particular case, with or without Iranian direction, I think that they would have wanted to get in on the action. But I think that they have decided that it's best to coordinate their actions with Tehran in this case. I suspect that there were messages to Tehran earlier saying, we'd like to jump in. Do you think now would be a good time? And they were probably told, no, why don't you hold off for a bit? But I think you're also correct that they don't necessarily do everything that Tehran wants at every stage, not necessarily in this conflict, but more generally speaking. And that's been the case in terms of the militias in Iraq. It's been the case for Hezbollah. There aren't going to be clear lines of command and control as though these groups were all simply extensions of the IRGC. They're not. It's more complicated than that. They're deeply allied, but I don't think that they take every marching order from Tehran.
Hisham, tell us about the potential threat for now, if for now they are targeting Israel and that's it. Tell us about the threat to Israel, because we have seen this after October the 7th, 2023, when the war started in Gaza. The Houthis repeatedly fired at Israel. Most of that didn't hit, but they have hit their targets before. I think the most notable occasion was in 2024 when Prime Minister Netanyahu came back from the UN General Assembly, having ordered the death of the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. They managed to hit Ben Gurion Airport on that occasion.
And for the time being, I honestly think it's a little bit more performative. It's about sending a message. They've been lobbing a lot of drones, a lot of missiles in the past. And damage-wise, it has been insignificant. The reason they did now, they just wanted to signal their entry into the conflict, that now that they have joined the war, they could do a lot more damage in the Red Sea. That's where the real strategic objective exists. And they haven't done that for now because they have certain discussions ongoing with the Saudis. Again, just as Dr. Helier mentioned, there's a bit of coordination also with Tehran and the other members of the Axis, that this can be the second escalatory step. So they're holding back a bit. They could use that card when necessary. And if and when the U.S. troops arrive in the region with boots on the ground. And for the time being, it's a bit of a waiting game.
Mick, do you think they'll be worried in Washington about potential attacks on U.S. assets as well as Israeli assets, even if they don't stop shipping at this stage? My understanding is that one of the two U.S. aircraft carriers, the Abraham Lincoln, is now just off Salalah in Oman, which is very close to the Yemeni border. It could be targeted by the Houthis.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we've got several naval assets right in the region, and they are vulnerable to missile attack. They have, of course, very good defenses, but no defense is impervious. And that's a big concern, because it's not only going to be coming from one direction, but now it could potentially be coming from another. So, yes, I think they're very concerned about this, and they're probably thinking that there's a potential that the Houthis are being somewhat held back because they want to see where these negotiations go. But if the U.S. launches a ground operation to, say, take Karg Island or some of the islands around the Strait of Hormuz, or even the ability to recover the HEU, the Houthis could be requested to jump in. I totally agree that they're on the lower end of control when it comes to proxy forces, but they also have a pure motivation to attack and fight the Americans. So I think that's a real concern and a real possibility, and something that I think Iran knows that the U.S. has to take into our calculation when and if we decide to launch an actual ground operation.
HEU, the highly enriched uranium that is somewhere buried in the rubble, we think, after that bombardment by the US last year. Also last year, HA, there was the bombardment of the Houthis by the US. 6 weeks, in fact, 52 days of bombardment. At the end of that, President Trump seemed to respect them. He said on the day that the truce came into force, they had a great ability to withstand punishment. Do you think that truce between the Houthis and the US is still in place right now?
I think we'll see. I think it'll be the next few days when we identify how far that still goes. The Houthis, of course, are very strongly aligned with the Iranians. I think that they do not see these negotiations as negotiations. I don't think anyone really does. I think what's going on right now are the preparations, very hopeful, optimistic preparations for negotiations going forward. But all of this talk from the White House and the Trump administration indicating that there's great amounts of talk going on with these negotiations, I think, frankly, is quite farcical. Nobody really takes that seriously, nor should they. Moreover, even if there were negotiations going on, I think it will take a lot of work to get the Iranians to come to the table in those negotiations, considering that twice now, in the midst of negotiations, the United States has attacked Tehran, has attacked the Iranians. The Iranians are odious, don't get me wrong. It's a horrible regime. But if we're trying to engage with the regime in order to de-escalate or negotiate, this simply isn't going to work. So when it comes to how the Houthis are going to respond to the United States, remember when that deal came in, a lot of this very recent, of course, history, we're only talking less than a year and a half of this Trump administration, but a lot has happened since those discussions that led to the ceasefire with the Houthis came into play. And this is now, I think, identified by this so-called axis of resistance as being an existential conflict for the Iranian regime. And it is.
Hisham, I've seen some speculation that the Houthis may also be trying to send a message to Saudi Arabia. There was a full-scale war with Saudi Arabia from 2015 that went on for 7 years. There's a sort of fragile truce in that one as well. Do you think there's any truth in the fact that they're trying to send a message to Saudi Arabia? Because there have been talks between the Houthis and Saudi Arabia, and the Houthis want money from Saudi Arabia, don't they?
Yes, they do. And I'm glad you raised that point, because the Houthis, for the past few months, they've been escalating with their rhetoric against the Saudis, trying to extract additional concessions, trying to move forward with the Yemen peace agreement, which has been constantly delayed because of local events, especially with the Southern Transitional Resistance, the debacle we've had at the end of December, beginning of January. And they've actually issued statements just last week where they demanded that the Saudis start making payments towards public salaries in Houthi-controlled areas. And right now, the Houthis are basically saying, you cannot continue to ignore us, Saudi. We know that you're dealing with a lot of issues in the region, but we've been waiting for a very long time, and there hasn't been any breakthroughs in the discussions or binding agreements, if you will, or payments being made. So again, this is a shot across the bow for the Saudis. And now that the Houthis realizing that the Saudis are using their West-East pipeline and exporting mainly through the port of Yanbu on the Red Sea. So again, this is a message from the Houthis saying, we could hurt you if you want to, if we raise the stakes and shut down Bab el-Mandab. So you better start to attend to our demands.
Nick, when you see the way this is going, you are a former senior Pentagon official. You were Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Pentagon, but you're also a retired U.S. Marine reservist, a retired CIA paramilitary operations officer. When you see where it's going across the region, do you fear that, had this been a few years ago, this is the sort of occasion when you might have actually had to go into battle on Iranian soil? Do you think that now is a real possibility, U.S. boots on the ground?
I do. I mean, ultimately, shifting an asset like the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit from the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East indicates to me they intend to use it, or they would not have done it. I mean, I have questions about why these assets weren't in the region in the first place. It looks like this was planned to essentially just be an air campaign, and perhaps that's what it should have been, and then we should have found a way out diplomatically, but it's clear to me that all the indications, not only of the 31st MU, but now we have the 11th MU en route. We have the immediate response force from the 82nd Airborne Division that should be there within days. It indicates to me that we have potentially underestimated the Iranians' ability to control the Strait of Hormuz. We don't believe negotiations are going to work, and we intend to try to forcibly open it. That would be a major escalation.
Let me just get in there. If I can get in there very quickly. If you were one of those Marines in those Marine expeditionary units you mentioned, would you have some trepidation? Do you fear this could go very, very badly?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the Marines, if they're given the order, will take the island. There's no doubt about it, whether it's Karg Island, Abu Musa, whichever island. But the question I would have, of course, as a Marine, you don't really ask these questions, is what's the purpose? We can do it. How is this actually going to help us strategically? What if we get on Karg Island and we become, of course, infiltrated with nonstop indirect fire, and the Iranians simply don't care? They don't care, and they won't open up the strait simply because we control the mechanisms to process oil on that island. And then we just become essentially sitting ducks, and we might have to withdraw under fire. And that would be a big strategic, I think, failure for the United States, not because the Marines can't take the island, but it's because they can't necessarily explain to me why that would essentially open the strait. And that's the same, I think, when it comes to other potential operations for the Marines. And I do think there's a lot of questions on that inside the Pentagon from the uniform military officers that are responsible for planning these operations. But yes, I would be concerned not about necessarily myself, but about what is the actual purpose for this, and is it actually going to get us to where we want? Are we just doing it to do it?
HA, talk of the military being needed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. What, though, would be the global implications if that other vital strait in the Red Sea, the Bab el-Mandeb, if that was closed by the Houthis? Because that is still something that they could do, and they've tried to do before, reasonably effectively with hijackings and targeting with missiles, shipping in that strait.
Thank you, James. Before I get to that, just one slight additional comment to my colleague. I think that military minds do realize how difficult, how dangerous this sort of operation could be. The concern that I think many in DC now have is that this sort of information simply isn't getting to the top. That the president is not really being told all of this because, frankly, the current administration does not value expertise that contradicts the express preferences of the president. And I think that's a very dangerous structural flaw that exists in this particular Trump administration, which has led us to where I think we are right now. With regards to Bab el-Mandeb, anything north of 10% of global seaborne trade goes through this particular corridor. LNG, grain, and of course, containers of various things. It's a very narrow strait. It's 18 miles at its narrowest. There's no practical workaround. The closest workaround is going via the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa, which means an extra 10 days of travel and an extra $1 million per voyage. So there's a lot that goes into what kind of cascading disruption this could have if Bab el-Mandeb becomes effectively inoperative.
And if they were to try and make it inoperative, Hisham, how easy would that be for the Houthis? And would it require a major operation or just a handful of strikes?
Just a handful of strikes, and just going back to what Mick said in the past, with aerial airstrikes, what have you, they managed to debilitate some of the Houthi capabilities, but did not take them off the chessboard. In fact, the Houthis have managed to build their capacity to build some of those components and outsource some part of it away from Iran. They've been getting a lot of stuff from China as well, for instance. And they've managed to rebuild over the past few months, and they've gotten really adept at that over the past 10 years of the conflict with the Saudis. So they have quite the stockpile to attack those ships and across those 18 miles. And all it takes is a couple of drones, which pretty much cost about somewhere between $2,000 to $5,000 to the Houthis. It takes a whole lot more to shoot down those drones. And it became exceedingly obvious in the last bout of conflict that Houthis could do a lot of damage with swarm attacks, not just by drones, but also seaborne UAVs as well. And it's difficult to protect all the ships all the time from the Houthi attacks, and the Houthis know it.
So, Mick, do you think there's a scenario that the Houthis do this, and then President Trump decides it's too costly for the global economy to continue? He abandons his war on Iran.
It is plausible, but I would agree with HA that normally this would have been gone through the policy coordination process in the National Security Council that used to exist in every administration up until now. So we've seen multiple reports that that's simply not the case anymore, and that this was planned by just a handful of people: the president, the vice president, secretary of defense, state, and the chairman. That's normally not the case. There's usually many discussions that bring in multiple different agencies, and all the issues and planning, including messaging, of course, which was really way off at the beginning of this, of why we went to war, would have already been thought through. And so I don't know if this is something that they've thought through or something they're just going to deal with if it happens. I don't, I guess there's different ways of doing things, but that's not how I think you run a war. You essentially have to plan for contingencies and what you're going to do if they happen. If the Houthis enter this and close down the Bab el-Mandeb, or certainly close it to the point where commercial traffic won't go through it, which is all they have to do, then we should have a plan in place. And potentially it is to avoid that potentiality instead of trying to deal with it when it happens. Because it's clear right now that when it comes to the economic aspect of this conflict, the Iranians have the upper hand. The United States, of course, has to deal with the consequences. Our partners and allies around the world have to deal with the consequences. And of course, ultimately, the United States is a democracy, and we have a vote coming up, and that matters. And I think the Iranians are certainly savvy enough to know all the above, especially the political implications of essentially escalating this war into one that involves